Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladarga Velazian, coming up in today's newscast. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in rare public criticism of the UN atomic watchdog. And as the investigation progresses, new details on the Egyptian officer who shot and killed 3 IDF soldiers. And following the hate-filled commencement speech at the City University of New York, a campaign now calling to revoke the university's special tax-exempt status. The International Atomic Energy Agency is capitulating to Iran. That is the message from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who accused the UN international watchdog with becoming politicized and irrelevant as a buffer to prevent Iranian military nuclearization. Netanyahu convened a security cabinet in the framework of the firm hand military exercise designed to confront Iranian threats. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
In blunt comments, Prime Minister Netanyahu told the cabinet that the IAEA is giving in to Iranian pressure and allowing Iran to lie about its activities.
איראן ממשיכה לשקר לסוכנות הבינלאומית לאנרגיה אטומית, סבא. הכניעה של סבא ללחץ האיראני היא כתם שחור על התנהלותה.
Netanyahu's comments claimed politicization of the IAEA report, claiming that Iran had given a satisfactory answer to explain one of 3 sites at which uranium particles had been detected.
אם הסוכנות לאנרגיה אטומית תהפוך לארגון פוליטי, אין שום משמעות לפעילות הפיקוח שלה באיראן, וגם לא תהיה שום משמעות לדוחות שהיא מפיקה על הפעילות הגרעינית של איראן. בכל מקרה, ישראל תחת הנהגתנו אינה עומדת מנגד. אנחנו עומדים על עמדתנו בתקיפות, הן בפומבי והן בחדרים סגורים.
Later at the command center in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu convened his security cabinet in the framework of the firm hand military exercise designed to confront Iranian threats. During the meeting, Netanyahu said, "We are committed to acting against the Iranian nuclear program, against missile attacks on Israel, and against the possibility that the fronts will become linked in what we call a multi-front campaign."
And so we know the news is fast-paced, and we want to let you know that ILTV's new app is now available. So if you want to stay connected to the latest news from Israel, the Middle East, and the Jewish world, download our app now on all your devices. It's available in the App Store for both Android and iPhone. And joining us now with more on the IAEA report and the Iranian threat is former Deputy National Security Advisor in Israel, Professor Chuck Freilich. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So the IDF's firm hand military exercise announced to prepare for the potential of confrontation with Iran. In your estimate, is the multi-front scenario that the Prime Minister is warning about likely in the coming period?
Well, in the coming period, I hope not, and I wouldn't directly tie it, or I wouldn't tie it to the IAEA report. If and when we decide, I hope we never reach that point, but if and when we decide that we have to take military action against Iran, that will likely lead to a multi-front response. And there, of course, is a danger that one of the more limited confrontations, such as the one that we just had about 3 weeks ago with the PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, can expand and become a multi-front confrontation as well with Hamas, Hezbollah, potentially, of course, even with the Iranians themselves.
Mm-hmm. Now, I want to get to the IAEA report in a minute, but you mentioned a potential military strike. Do you think that Israel might be preparing, in fact, to deliver a preventive strike to end the Iranian nuclear threat? I mean, it was done by then Prime Minister Begin against the reactor in Iraq and Prime Minister Olmert against the reactor in Syria, and perhaps Netanyahu will be the one to take out the Iranian program. He certainly has warned about it multiple times.
Well, he's been prime minister for 13 years and hasn't done it so far. There's no comparison, actually, between the Iraqi and the Syrian reactor cases and the case we face now, because then it was a one-off. There was one site which, if you could destroy the program or at least put it off for a considerable period of time. At this point, the Iranians have multiple targets. They could be destroyed. But the real issue is that they have the knowledge necessary if they decide to rebuild after an attack. And so you have to ask yourself, well, how long am I going to achieve by attacking? And I don't know any experts in the world who think that more than a few years, really, and when I say few, I mean very few years, could be gained by military action. By the way, even if the United States did it, and of course American capabilities are far greater than Israel's, it's too late for that. A military strike at this point might be able to gain a limited period of time, but not very much.
So you're saying that essentially that Israel and the United States have missed the window of opportunity for a military response?
Well, I think they've missed the opportunity for destroying the program. Again, if your objective is a comparatively short-term postponement, then that can still be done. Once you have that postponement, if necessary, you could take military action again. You could gain a second postponement. Of course, in the meantime, other things will continue to take place. We constantly hear of reports attributed to Israel, sometimes to the U.S., of sabotage operations in Iran. Then there's the whole international diplomatic and economic pressure route. And maybe if Israel took military action, there's no doubt that there would be strong international pressure against it afterwards. But if Israel might then take military action again, there would certainly be a lot of pressure on Iran to really put an end to the program or curb it substantially.
And now back to the incident with the IAEA. Israel has certainly had its complaints over the years about the organization. But was this kind of broadside against the international atomic watchdog that we heard from the Prime Minister, was this warranted?
I don't believe so. I think the IAEA is a essentially purely professional organization. And let's put it this way. It's as close to a professional organization as exists in the international community. And the IAEA has long been an indirect means of postponing the Iranian program because they've continually imposed further demand. They are one of the more important instruments available to us today. And I think that this kind of broad condemnation, you can condemn a specific action. Nobody is infallible. But I don't believe that this was justified. I think this was a case of politicization. And I think it's a fact that it's a reflection of the fact that the Prime Minister's policies for dealing with the Iranian issue have failed utterly.
Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about the diplomatic route, which Washington is seeking to take. And as you mentioned, Netanyahu has been a vocal opponent of the U.S., of course, withdrawing from the deal. But even so, there were reports that Iran was continuing its program despite being signed onto the deal. So really, what options are left today? Do you think that Israel would be better served by a new deal or by international pressure to convince Iran not to produce weapons?
Well, first of all, there is no proof that Iran was in violation of the deal at the time that the U.S. withdrew. The U.S. withdrew for other reasons, namely the fact that then President Trump simply didn't like the deal. Mm-hmm. And in withdrawing in that manner, he greatly undermined American credibility for the future, for all presidents. Look, I think if you take a very quick process of elimination, you come to the conclusion that a new nuclear deal, if it could be achieved, and I'm quite dubious of that, is by far the best option. Because as I was saying, military action at best bears the prospects of limited gains in time. The same for the sabotage operations that have caused delays, but not more. Sanctions alone don't do it. I always like to note that North Korea and Cuba have been under heavy international sanctions since the 1950s, and they're about to change their policy at any minute now. Maybe not. Regime change could happen tomorrow or 50 years from now, or maybe more, who knows. It would be very nice if there was regime change in Iran, but we can't count on it. In the end, the only thing which might provide a long-term solution rather than at best a short-term gain of time is a new deal. The problem is that at this point, the Iranians don't seem to want to go back to one. And I don't know if it can be achieved.
All right. Well, Professor Freilich, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us about this important issue.
Thank you.